Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're specifically going to talk about the party painting. In Stranger Things Season 4, Episode 1, there are spoilers for all of Stranger Things in this content, but I think the party painting is incredibly important. So let me set the context, and I want to make a point about Wizards of the Coast and how Wizards of the Coast is echoing, in my humble opinion, Gary Gygax's actions in 2022, the same actions Gary Gygax took in 1974. All right, and I think there's evidence for this in Stranger Things season 4, episode 1. All right, so let's talk about the party painting. So let's talk about the party. That's literally the name they use for it in Stranger Things. The party. The party is the core four, okay? So the party is the Dungeons & Dragons core group, okay? Which is, I call it Whale DM, Will, Lucas, Dustin, and Mike, okay? Now, people are attached to that group, and the group itself devolves at certain times. Lucas abandons Dungeons & Dragons in Season 4 and chooses a jock life instead, which is horrible. And he is punished immediately for that decision. If you choose jocks over, a Dungeons and Dragons crew in life, you're going to get punished for that decision. Like, it is never going to work better, right? I'll be truthful. That will work better for you 1 out of 1,000 times. If you make it to professional sports, then that trade is going to be worth it. If you don't, your trade is definitely not going to be worth it. So for 999 people who make that choice, it is definitely not going to work out well for them. But for 1 out of 1,000, I'll be honest, if you make it to the pro level of sports, then trading a jock crew, trading a D&D crew for a jock crew will work out for you. 999 times out of 1,000, it's not going to work out for you. All right, so basically, you have Will, Lucas, and Dustin, and Mike. Okay, all right. So basically, they're in Lenora. So Mike has gone to Lenora, California, from Hawkins, Indiana, and he is visiting 11 because 11 is his girlfriend, and he really wants to see her, and so he makes a trip to see her. She is, of course, captured by some, evil government conspiracy group, and then she's back with Papa. Boy, that's a creepy name. So basically, so she gets back, and so Will gets there, and Mike goes to Lenora, and then at that point, Will has to face the fact that has to deal with the issues that Mike is having with 11. So Mike and 11's relationship is under incredible strain, and the primary reason for this is Mike is a gigantic jerk. Mike is a very skilled dungeon master, and he is a good friend to his friends, right? But when he becomes a boyfriend, he's really horrible at it. The first thing that happens is 11 says, "I love you" to him, and he doesn't return it back. I'm going to give you some advice. I've been married for 30 years. If you ever get into a relationship and you say, "I love you," and that person doesn't say it back, thank you, next. Move on. That is not a good sign. It means that person is not looking at the clues on the ground, is not willing to reciprocate at the right time. It's very bad. And the reality is 11 should definitely leave Mike as a love interest. He's not a good boyfriend. And honestly, he's pretty much, it's kind of weird. Like, I think Mike is kind of a jerk in the show, and Finn Wolfhard is definitely a jerk in real life. Like, this is my Stranger Things is my number one show, and I am watching all of these movies. Finn Wolfhard and Millie Bobby Brown are right now determining if they're going to be like the next Jennifer Lawrence and Tom Hanks. Like, that's the question, legit. Like, there are billions of dollars on the line with these two, and so I'm watching their careers very, very carefully. And I've seen Finn Wolfhard in a lot of interviews, and he is a monster person. He is not a nice person, just not a good person at all. In my opinion, he's bought the Hollywood line completely, And I get that that's kind of necessary to get where you're going, but it's not good. But his character, he's done a lot of his real life jerkhood into his character, and Mike a straight up jerk in the show. He's an epic dungeon master, but he is a very bad boyfriend, right? So basically, Will is seeing a problem with his Dungeons and Dragons friend, Mike, right? And he realizes Mike is really twisted up over this 11 issue, and really gets into it with Mike, and finally shows Mike what he did. So 11 commissioned a piece of art from Will. That is the party painting, okay? And the party painting is a very detailed, incredibly detailed. Like this is. So I have two daughters who are absolutely magnificent, incredibly dedicated artists, visual artists. And they'll sit down on the couch and they'll sketch out a piece, and they can sketch a form in literally 5-10 minutes, right? But then often they'll go to another level for a piece, right? They'll ink it and they'll color it in with Ohuhu markers, and even some more high end markers, and put a lot of color into it. And then there are other pieces where they'll work on the piece for weeks or months, right? And so Will has been working on the party painting for weeks or months, and he said this was a commission from 11, right? She commissioned me to do this work. She said, this is what I want, right? And so Will, takes this piece, which is incredibly personal to him, and really it was never intended to be shown to Mike. It was intended to be given to 11, right? And he shows the commission to Mike, and he says, look, here you are in the picture, and it has all of them. It has Lucas's player character, it has Dustin's player character, it has Will's player character, it has and it has Whale DM, it has Will, Lucas, Dustin, and Mike's. All their characters are there, and they're fighting a dragon, right? They're fighting a red dragon, and you see the red dragon first, right? And essentially, the show is very careful. They do this very carefully. They're like, hey, this isn't all about Dungeons and Dragons. This is about real life. And so Will unrolls the scroll, and first thing he shows is the red dragon, right? And he pauses there before he rolls it out and shows the rest of the characters, right? Will actually lets Mike see the red dragon, and he's saying, hey, the red dragon is your relationship with 11. You are incredibly worried that it's going to fall apart, and frankly, there is a good chance that could happen, but if you do the right thing and you just, do what is necessary to save this relationship, you can be a good person and you can be a good boyfriend. And Will actually very carefully encourages his friend and says, and then rolls out the rest of the painting and says, look, here's our group, here's everybody. Here's Will, here's Lucas, here's Dustin, and here's you, Mike, right? And here's you, Mike. You are in the position of a fighter, right? And you have sword and board. You have a sword, and on your board, on your shield, is a heart and a crown, right? You are a leader, and you are our heart. And he says, you are the heart of this group, right? And basically, our friendship is always going to be strong. But the reality is your relationship with 11 is now in the mix, right? And the reality is you simply need to show the same courteousness and helpfulness, and just be the person that you are with us, with 11, and you can save your relationship. So here, what is Will doing? Well, I'll tell you what Will is doing. So, in my humble opinion, in 1974, Gary Gygax did not create a game. He created a life improvement engine, a human improvement engine. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is, in my humble opinion. He disguised it as a game, right? And so what's really wild is I'm saying to you, hey, don't play Dungeons and Dragons, use Dungeons and Dragons, right? What is Wizards of the Coast telling you in Stranger Things season 4? Oh, you're like, oh, Scott, this was made by Netflix and the Duffer Brothers. No, there are a stream of messages. Like, this is not being made in some silo. There is constant conversation between Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons crew and the Stranger Things. This isn't just a show commenting on Dungeons and Dragons. They're working in tandem with Dungeons and Dragons, and and Dungeons and Dragons is reflecting Stranger Things literally in their product line. And Stranger Things is using Dungeons and Dragons as a booster rocket to make and they're doing this in a symbiotic business relationship, right? And so Wizards of the Coast, in my humble opinion, is simply echoing what Gary did in 1974. They're telling you flat out in Stranger Things, don't play Dungeons and Dragons, use Dungeons and Dragons. In my humble opinion, the Will Mike party painting, it's so clear. He's like, hey, here's this problem in your life, right? Here you are depicted in a Dungeons and Dragons way, but you need to understand what's happening at the table, and the relationships we've built through Dungeons and Dragons are a direct lesson to be leveraged in your life. This is not a game. This is how you find the love of your life and how you make a better life and how you don't lose the most important thing you've ever met, which is 11. You have to do it through the lessons you learn in Dungeons & Dragons. So Wizards of the Coast is saying, oh, we're just a game, right? We just want you to know that game will determine who your romantic partner is for the rest of your life. And if you listen to the lessons that you learn in the game, you'll have a happy life. And if you lose the love of your life, you'll probably be a drunk and and have a terrible life, right? So maybe pay more attention at the table, because all of life's greatest lessons are being taught at the table. In my humble opinion, all that's happening in Stranger Things season 4, episode 1, is Wizards of the Coast acknowledging, saying the quiet part loud. In my humble opinion, they're saying the quiet part loud. They're saying, yes, we honor Gary Gygax in every single book that comes out in 5th edition, right? Far more than any legacy version, right? And the people who love Gary the most and want Gary's legacy to never disappear play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And we're saying that, yes, Gary Gygax was, in my humble opinion, Stranger Things, season 4, episode 1, is WOTC's admission that they understood. They now, 48 years later, fully understand what Gary did. And they're saying, yeah, we're a corporation. We can't tell you that we sell a human improvement engine, but we know it. And they're saying, they're literally showing Will using Dungeons and Dragons, not playing Dungeons and Dragons, and saying the most important things in your life have to do with how you understand the game, that the campaign that you went through. That's shocking. That is incredibly shocking, right? So I have this incredibly unique view of Dungeons and Dragons. I know nobody else has a view of Dungeons & Dragons the way I do, but it's so shockingly clear, and I'm just asking you, just look at the mounting evidence. Just look at the mounting evidence, right? And you'll see, and I think you will have the same opinion that I have very soon, unless you have an agenda, right? And you're like, oh no, I'm really dedicated to make sure that no one ever thinks that, the inventor of Chutes and Ladders and the inventor of Dungeons & Dragons, they're the same thing. They're just a scrub, meaningless, game designer who brought, a little bit of fun into the world, right? So if you have an agenda and you want to keep Gary small, yeah, you'll be able to close your eyes to this evidence. But if you are looking at the evidence on the ground, in my humble opinion, it is shockingly clear that Wizards of the Coast is fully embracing the idea. Recently, Ray Winninger flat out said there are coded messages in Dungeons & Dragons. He said, we write a rule, but we mean something different. He just said it, right? Like, there is increasing, mounting evidence that Dungeons & Dragons is a human improvement engine, not a game, never was, is not now, and never was in any version of the game, and certainly not in 5th edition, right? Which is Gary's truest, purest, boldest legacy, right? All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.